Greetings. In this video, we'll discuss the basic Poly spaceship playlist. In this first movie, we'll tackle movies 1 through 4. And in a second movie, we'll look at movie number 5 all by itself. Movies 1 through 3 involve the extrude tool. And movie 4 is the technique of transforming components in order to fine-tune or shape your model. Okay, let's get started. Here I am in the Maya Classic mode. Remember that we'll be using our channel box, our modeling toolkit, and our attribute editor for most of the projects that we'll be working on. The channel box icon is here, and the toolkit icon is here. In a previous movie that you should have watched before starting this movie, Object and Component Modes, I reviewed how to switch between using object, where when we transform, we're transforming the object, translating it there, rotating it, and scaling it. But when we go into component mode, this is the object mode, and if we go into component mode, we'll see we can pick a component, in this case a vertex, and we can move that. We can use the shift key to make multiple selections. Now I'm moving those two vertices, I'm rotating their relative position, and I'm scaling their relative position. There are edges and faces which aren't on by default. If we right click, we see those same three component types: vertex, edge, and face. Vertex I can select, edge I can select, and face I can select, and we can transform those components. So I demonstrated those means of selecting components in that previous video, and I said, and this is what we want to take away, sometimes you get stuck in the component mode, and a way just to get back into object mode is just to manually go to component, manually go back to object, and that will shake it from kind of being locked in a particular mode. Now the third way of selecting components that I didn't mention in that initial overview is in the modeling toolkit. This icon here at the top is the object mode. It's the equivalent of right-clicking and going to object mode, or clicking this icon here. So this icon, right-clicking to 2 o'clock, and this button icon here, all are object mode. Here is vertex, a shortcut to selecting vertex, and you see that it highlighted the last vertex that I had selected. I'm hitting the Z key to undo. We can come and pick an edge with edges here, and we can come and pick faces and manipulate the faces that way. So 3 ways of selecting components, 3 ways of getting out of component mode back to object mode. In this instance, we're going to come into object mode, and we're going to be using this tool here, the extrude tool. And we'll be extruding faces. Note here that we're Z forward. So if I look here at my axis direction, the little lines are pointing in the positive direction. So here we are at the origin. You can see that it's Z forward. If I was going that way, it would be negative. And let's open our channel box and just verify that. So right when I push backwards, we see it's on the Z in the negative direction. If I went forward, it's positive Z. This direction is positive X. You can see that indicated there. That direction, right, away from the line is negative. Positive Y, we can see that there, and negative Y. I'm hitting the Z key to undo each of those. And what we just want to make sure is that our nose is positive Z and that our wings are on the X-axis. And then, of course, our fin would be in the positive Y direction. Hitting the Q key just to make selections easier. Sometimes when you're making selections and you have a transform tool available, you'll inadvertently move the transform. You'll inadvertently touch one of the arrows or push it or pull it or rotate it, transform it slightly. So if you're not transforming and you're just making selections, it's a good idea to have the select tool, and the Q key on the keyboard is a shortcut for that. In the channel box, again, channel box tab, or click this icon here, we're going to scale it up by 5 just to make it a little bit larger than the default. I wanted to mention here that this is the attribute. So if I were to say click on the scale Z attribute, you'd be clicking the word scale Z, and you see that it's highlighted in blue. If we say click on the scale Z field, that's this, and our keyboard now becomes an input device. So this is the scale Z attribute. This is the scale Z field. I'm going to click drag all three scale fields, and then I can just type in the number once, and it applies those to all the fields. Reminder on our navigation, I'm going to hit the Q key again just to get rid of that scale tool. The Option key on the Mac and the Alt key on a PC. With my left mouse button allows me to dolly around. I'm holding down the Option key in my left mouse button. The Option key in the middle mouse button allows us to track up, down, left, and right. And the Option key in our right mouse button allows us to zoom in and out. And note your keyboard F will frame, really center the object in your viewport. All right, let's begin. We're going to right click and choose face. We're going to be extruding faces, which will extend the faces. So I'm going to click there. I'm going to dolly around, again, Option, left mouse button. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click a second face. I'll hit the 4 key just so that we can see that both of them are selected, both faces. This is the face on the positive X side. This is the face on the negative X side. And we can see here positive Z is facing forward. Let's come to the modeling toolkit, and we'll execute our first tool, which is the extrude tool. I'll just click on it. And note the manipulator tool that we get here, the transform of those additional faces. It's a combination tool. It's one tool that allows you to translate, rotate, and scale all together. We don't recommend this tool for scaling, but certainly for rotating, but we do use this to translate and scale. Now, it's a little bit tricky, and so I recommend that you just hang out here for a moment and get the sense of how this tool works. I'm going to grab the blue arrow, which indicates the Z, right? This is a local direction, and I'll pull it out, and you see that it's pulling out the new set of extrusions. If I hit the 5 key, I can see that I've added an additional set of faces on each side of the object. And it's pulling it out symmetrically. Now, if we wanted to move down, right, note that it's not moving in the same direction. And if we pull in this axis direction, it does function. So we're going to talk about making the object function symmetrically, and there are several different contexts for working in symmetry. But for this project, we're just going to manually select both sides for the extrusion. We'll talk about symmetry when we get to manipulating the components. Now, here's another little funky part of this tool, is that when I click on the cube, the central icon becomes a proportionate cube scale tool. So in other words, if I just push on that cube, I'm scaling in that direction only on that axis. If I were to click in this direction, oops, that's the move tool. I missed the scale cube. Going down to the cube, hitting Z key to undo. But as soon as I click on one of those cubes, regardless of the axis, the central icon turns into a cube, and this is the proportionate cube tool. So that's the first takeaway is, are you scaling in only one axis direction, or are you scaling all axis directions at the same time, a proportionate scale? So this is a non-proportionate scale, Z key to undo, and this is a proportionate scale, Z key to undo. And the first thing we'll do is just pull that down. I want to take a little time out to talk about one of the other icons on that. You don't have to do this. This isn't part of the movie, but I want to demonstrate world space versus local space. So I'm picking this face that looks like it's about a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to hit extrude. Now by default, the extrude tube pops up in local. What that means is I'll extrude and it follows that same angle, right? So whatever the parent face is, the new sets of faces follow that angle. I'm going to hit the Z key. Hit the Z key again just to make sure that I don't have a double extrusion there. I'm going to pick that face again, hit extrude. But this time, note this little switch here, this little light blue switch that's pointed straight up. You'll see this switch icon often, and it allows you to change the attributes of a tool. In this case, we only have two. We have local space here or world space. Now you'll see if I pull that same arrow, I'm only able to move in left, right, up, down if I pull on one of the arrows. So that is world space. This is local space. Let me get into this view. Hit undo again. So local and world. Right? World is up, down, left, right, forward, backward. And local space is any custom angle. So that's what that little icon represents. I'm going to come and select this face, make sure I've got the face on the other side holding the Shift key. You can hit the 4 key just to make sure that you have them both selected. And I'm going to hit extrude. In this case, and this time, rather than translating the new sets of faces, I'm going to scale the new sets of faces. And I'll, again, click on the little cube, which gives me the central cube and allows me to scale this down. Now in the videos, I just have you pull this out and get kind of an equidistance around. I'm going to hit the undo key a couple times. Yeah, let's get back. And let's try that again. And I just wanted to show you, you could come and use the offset. I'm putting my cursor over the word offset, and with my left mouse button, I'm scrubbing and it's changing the value here. And if you want to have an equidistance, a perfectly equal distance around a rectangle that's been extruded, you can use the offset and it keeps an equal distance around there. I'm going to hit undo just to show you the way that I did it in the movie. I think I was just trying to keep things simple for that. Extrude, click a cube, central cube, scale that down, scale that up. Then we'll do it again. Extrude, and we'll pull that out. So when you extrude, you want to move the new sets of faces or scale the new sets of faces. A very, very common mistake is to hit the extrude tool and not transform it at all. You kind of forget. Then you'll extrude again, and what happens is you have two faces in the exact same place. And you can't have two of anything in the exact same place. The subdivision or the smoothing won't work. UV mapping becomes very difficult, and then any deformations would be problematic. So when you hit the extrude tool, make sure that you're pulling or scaling and not leaving those two faces in the same place. Here I'll scale that down, and I think we scale it in, and I'm just kind of going from memory here, and we can pull that back. Hit the 5 key, and so we've given ourselves the additional topology that we need for our little basic poly spaceship here. I'm going to grab the central face, and I'm just going to breeze through this. You can play the video slower, or you can just pause and rewind. But at this point, we just extrude this out, click the cube, scale it down. And in this case, I'm putting my cursor on the divisions and scrubbing with my left mouse button. You can put as many divisions as you want. You can type it in directly, and we're using 3. Here we'll come and grab the top face. We'll hit extrude. We're going to pull that in. And here's an example of having multiple components in the same place. There's actually 2 faces here. So we want to make sure that we scale that in a little bit so that we can see that face. That face was infinitely small, sitting in the same place, and that will cause problems down the line. So whenever you extrude, either move it a bit or scale it a bit. Don't leave faces sitting on top of each other. We'll hit extrude again, and we can pull this straight up. We can scale it in, maybe scale it in this direction, and then maybe pull it back. So again, be considerate or careful clicking on the cubes for scaling, clicking on the arrows for translating or moving. All right, we can come to the back and we'll give it some exhaust. I'll click face, we'll hit extrude. I'm clicking any one of the cubes to give myself a central cube and then scaling that down. We'll hit extrude again and we'll just pull that inside, hit a cube, scale it in a little bit. And so we've got an area for an exhaust. We'll do the same on these. I'm going to select for some type of input. We'll hit extrude, click the cube, scale it in a little bit if you want to do it non-proportionately, or again, Z key, I'll come. If you just wanted to get an offset, that gets it pretty close. Hit extrude and we'll pull that in. Now, actually, let me make sure I'm pulling straight back. All right. And then we'll get the cockpit, very basic. Just hit extrude and we'll pull it in. Note this would be a problem. We want to scale that down just a little bit. We'll hit extrude, pull that up, scale that down. Maybe that's a little too high. And there is our basic ship. So now that you've completed your basic box model, you might want to save this. You probably would want to save this. When it comes to saving, once you've saved it, you can then use increment and save. And I recommend anytime you get something that you would want to keep, or you come to a fork in the road, use increment and save, and or every 5 or 10 minutes. So every 5 or 10 minutes, I'll either save or increment and save. Just because the computer can crash, the electricity can go off, you might work yourself into a corner and want to go back a previous set of versions. So say you make a mistake and you want to go back and just lose 10 minutes rather than losing an hour worth of work. So save often, and you can use the increment and save, which if I didn't mention, it adds a number to your title. What we're going to do here is use transforming components to fine-tune. We can pick any component. Remember that we have 3 kinds of components. We have vertexes, we have edges, and we have faces. I could pick all 4 of these vertexes. That would be the equivalent of picking all 4 edges or picking the face. And practically speaking, you might want to select one or the other, or depending on the particular model. So we could rotate that down. It would have been easier for me to just choose face. Oops, make sure you just have the one face. You know what, I'm going to undo that just to show you. I hit the 4 key. I had accidentally selected this face. So sometimes, if you're not exactly sure what you have selected, hitting the 4 key makes it a little bit easier to see. I went to pick the nose, but I got the top of the cockpit. So I'm just going to select that, and you can customize this however you want. Maybe we want the cockpit here to be lower in the front. Maybe we want the rear up high. We could pull that down. If we want to do something symmetrical, in this case, we're not going to select both sides. The extrude tool works best when you shift select on the other side and simply extrude one side and it will duplicate on the other. When we're talking about, say for instance, rotating and scaling, you have different axis directions over that central axis. But what they give us here is the ability to turn on symmetry. This would be down across the x-axis, so we would say object x. And we can see now that when I pick a face, let's say we pick this face here, it automatically highlights the other side. And this means I could rotate and we're getting the same action on both sides. So let's say we wanted to maybe taper that a little bit. Maybe we want to come and pick this edge and pull that back or pull that in. So all of those types of fun things. I could pick this edge, and one shortcut I haven't talked about yet is we can double click an edge and it'll go around and get the entire loop. I'm going to turn symmetry off and just do that again, so I can double click, and maybe we want to have a little bit of a taper on that rear side. So you can come in and play. Maybe we want, I'm going to turn symmetry back on. Maybe I want to pull that forward, use the shift key, pick both of them, maybe taper that forward a little bit, make it a little more aerodynamic. We could, when you're making selections, sometimes it's easier to go into the orthographic view. Maybe I want to grab all of these vertexes, and in the side view I can see, right, I could pull that up, or maybe I want to taper that one way or the other. Maybe pull that up, maybe pull this down. So just have fun manipulating the vertexes, the edges, and the faces. Make sure if you're doing something across the bilateral symmetry that you've got it on. Don't forget that object X is on. You may be doing something to one side that you want to maintain on it, and so you would have that off. Final thing, you'll turn it in just in this mode. We haven't talked about the 1, 2, and 3 mode. 3 is a shortcut to subdivision, which doubles all of the information, subdividing or smoothing. The 1 key is the true surface, the box model surface, and then 2 is a shortcut. We're going to talk a lot about subdividing, when to subdivide or smooth, and then of course the next question is, when I smooth it, how can I maintain hard edges? So those are all issues that we'll be taking up in the coming weeks. All right, in the next movie, we'll tackle movie number 5, which introduces you to the insert edge loop workflow and also how to attach separate polygons. We'll build some jet engines on the wings.